All right, Hawk, so I want to show you a little bit about writing numbers and how to write them, speak them, saying them. So let's just kind of go through and let's do some numbers. So I'm going to start with some basic ones. We're going to do the number 345. We'll cross these off as we do them. 17, 28, and then we'll move into some decimals. So let's do a number like this. And let's change that to that 17 to that one. And we're going to change the 28 to that one. All right, we'll see where that takes us. All right, so let's look at the number 345. So when I think of 345, you really have to think about that 3. That's not 3 ones. We wouldn't say that. We'd say you've 3 of the 100. So it's really important that that number goes in the right spot. So 345, it's funny because in other countries, there is no number like 40. What the way they're speak is it's 300s, 4 10s, 5 ones. Because we have numbers like 30, 40, 50, it can be tricky to understand that that 40 needs to go in the tens space. It'd be much easier if we said 300, like we usually do. We literally say 300. If we said 300, 4 10s, 5 ones, you would totally get this. So when I look at this number, it can be a little tricky if I said, well, how many tens do you have? Well, you'd say you have 4 tens. That's true, but you also have all these hundreds. And those hundreds can actually be broken into tens. If you think about like dollar bills, if you have $300 bills, you could turn those into tens. So there's two ways you could say it. You could say, yes, currently I have 4 tens. You could also look at this and say, but if you turned it all in, you have 34 tens. So the number actually tells you exactly how many tens you have. You just read everything up to it. And you may be asking, well, okay, so what about the fives? Well, you don't have enough fives currently to make a 10. You're going to need 10 ones to be able to turn that into another 10. And that kind of comes into that idea of like rounding. All right, so what if I asked you, okay, how many ones do you have? Well, that's how we read the number. You actually say you have 345 ones. You have 345. Where it gets tricky is when we start talking about reading a number to a different place value than what we see. So let's look at another one. Let's look at our 17. Okay. So in this case, how many tens do you have? Well, you have 110. How many ones do you have? Well, we don't say you just have 7 ones. We usually say you have 17 ones. We usually don't even say ones. We just say you have 17. So that's kind of how we read numbers. It's a little different way of thinking it. So really, what do you have here? Well, you've got a 10 and you have a 7. And how we talk to say it, we just say you have 17. Let's look at the 28. All right, so here's 28. Imagine if we talked about numbers and instead of a number like 20, we actually read that, well, you have 2 tens and 8 ones. Try that with your little brother or your parents and say, what time is it? What time is it? You could say, well, it's 4 tens and 7 ones. See how far that gets you. So when we say this, we really do have 2 tens and we have 8 ones. If we're just talking about the ones, how many ones do I have? Well, you have 28 of the ones. How many tens do you have? 2. You would need a few more of these to get another one of those. All right, so let's look at some decimals and talk about how to read those. All right, let's start with that first number. We're going to take that 345 and we're going to turn it into this number. I'm not going to read it just yet. Notice the big old decimal. Okay, so when you look at that, think, okay, how many tens do you have? Well, there it is. I've got 3 tens. How many ones do you have? Well, you might say, well, you have 4 ones. Yeah, but really you've got 34 ones. The number tells you. You have 34 ones. Everything in front of that, because we could take those tens and break them into ones. Okay, now here's a question. How many tenths do you have? I know you're thinking, oh, I've got 5 tenths. Well, maybe. Or maybe you want to look at the ones and the tenths. You actually have 45 of the tenths if you took all of these and broke them into tenths. Oh, what if you think even bigger? You actually have 345. What place value is that in? Tenths. If you took all of these and broke them into tenths, and you took all of these and you broke them into tenths, you'd have 345 tenths. So let's think about that like in terms of like money. You took all these tens and you broke them into, this is the same as dimes, and these are dollars. You'd have 345 dimes. So it's a little confusing, but you just read the number over to the place value, and that's what you have. So let me erase all that writing. Let's try a different number. It's a little bit smaller. Maybe we can talk about it a little bit more. Let's do the 17. But we said we were going to turn the 17 into, let me move that out of the way. We said we were going to turn the 17 into this. Make my decimal real big. I'll put it right in the middle, actually. Okay. So the question is, all right, how many ones do you have? Well, we have, I'm going to change color. You only have one one. You don't have enough of these right now to make another one. But what if I ask you how many tenths do you have? Could you turn this? Could you break it apart and turn it into tenths? Absolutely. This could give you 10 more. So instead of 7 tenths, you'd have 17 tenths. So let me go back just a step and you can see when I read that to you, one way to read that is when I say how many tenths do you have, you'd say we have 7. Yes, that's true. But you also have to remember these ones, and you could say, but I could have 17 tenths if I broke this apart. And so how do you know where to end it? Well, look at the place value you're in. That's our tenths. Okay, let's do one last one there. Okay, let's do the 2.8. Actually, so we're going to do that one. Yeah, let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so very similar. How many ones do you have? Nothing. How many tenths do you have? Well, I have 2 tenths. That's all I've got. How many hundredths do you have? Well, one way to look at it and say I've got 8 hundredths. But if you look at the whole number, all the way over, I have 28 hundredths. Literally, the place value tells me where I'm ending. 28 hundredths. Or I've got 2 tenths and 8 hundredths. That's kind of more the expanded form reading. I've got 2 tenths and 8 hundredths. Okay, let me do one more that I didn't add. Let me erase all that. And let's see if I can really show you one that kind of gets people a little like, huh. All right, let's do yellow. We haven't done yellow yet. Okay, here's a new number. Whoa, thinking, well, that one's kind of tricky. All right, so if I ask you how many ones you'd have, you'd say 1. How many tenths do you have? 3. How many hundredths? Nothing. Oh, not so fast. You could read that lots of ways. You could say I have, well, if I just combine my tenths and my hundredths, I have 30. If I look at my ones, tenths, and hundredths, I have 130 hundredths. Let's look all the way over then. How many thousandths do you have? It's true. You have 6 of the thousandths. How many thousandths could you totally possibly have? We started the number. You could have 1,306 thousandths. If I just ask you about the ones, how many ones do you have? Let me erase down here. How many ones do you have in this number? Only the ones. You could totally look at this number and say, well, I have 1. How many tenths do you have? Well, I've got 3 tenths. How many hundredths do you have? Well, I have no hundredths. And how many thousands do you have? I have 6 thousandths. So if we were really breaking it apart, we could look at each place value. But if I ask you how many hundredths, I have 130 hundredths. How many thousandths do you have? I have 1,306 thousandths. How many of the only thousandths do you have? Don't take any look at the other place values. You might then say, I have 6 thousandths in this number. So this is a little bit different way of probably reading numbers, but it really starts to help you understand as you read them what each place value means. Yeah, you have thousands, but you can't forget that you also have all these other numbers that are together. So we need to be able to see numbers as individual pieces, just this. We also need to see that this number is connected to all of these. Just like money. You might have 3 cents, but you may also have a dollar. And so if you have a dollar, that's another 100 cents that could be added to the 3 cents you have. So just a slight different way of looking at numbers.